Good day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about something very interesting because we have a guest who is a writer, who is a performing art, who belong to performing art, who is comedian, and there's a lot to know about that. And he is in the process of getting a diagnosis for autism. So we will know here a lot about him, but let's ask him to introduce himself. Hi, Phil. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Yeah. So I'm Philip. I'm a writer and now I'm a comedian. It's only been 2 weeks, but I am officially a comedian now. I started out by writing science fiction books and I realized I could do comedy because a lot of people told me they were very funny books. So that's the trajectory for me. And I'm looking towards an autism diagnosis because a lot of people in my family have it. And looking at their diagnoses and how they've passed the tests, the tests to determine whether you've got autism or not. I've looked at those and I realize actually I can relate to a lot of these things.
Fifth, tell me that, like you were when we were not recording yet, you talk about few things that is more like sensory problems, or you could say hypersensitivity. We actually call it sensory differences. If you're talking about sensory differences, and you're talking about headaches or headache or migraine and other things. So, what make you think that because you spend a whole life, you studied in the schools, you had university, like you're talking about something in the university also, and now you're a creative writer and you're performing now. What make you think about to go for that, to go for a diagnosis, or to want to know who you are, to have a new journey in your life?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think it's because once I went to university, I lived at the university in student accommodation. So I was away from family and I had a lot of time alone to think. And I started to realize that there's certain things that I do that the average person won't do. And when I was writing a short story, I could focus on that very intensely and finish a short story within a day, whereas it would take everybody else in my class about a month. And I thought, well, I'm not a genius. There must be something else going on because if I focus on something, I'll just focus on that, and I'll forget everything else. And I realized I would have a habit. I would forget to eat, so I wouldn't eat anything. If I was writing a story, I would forget to eat and drink. I would just be so engrossed in that task that until it was done, I wouldn't do anything else. And I met a few autistic people when I was writing at university, and I started to understand that I got along with them a lot better than I got along with everybody else. We seem to have a lot in common.
Can you hear me?
Just cut off for a second, so I was going to continue, but I'm glad you're back.
This is the issue with the internet. Sometimes it's come and go. So you say that you met a lot of autistic people, and
Mm.
you were maybe hyper focusing on one thing, or maybe that was your interest, or when whatever you are working with, you your whole being, your whole body, your whole mind was totally dedicated to that thing, and you forget things around, and you even forget your own needs. For example, you forget to eat, you will not drink something,
Mm.
and until and unless you finish that thing. And you said that a lot of people are not able to do that. um, but because you were in the university and you were in the hostel too, like you said that you were living in the accommodation, but when you came to home, how was thing over there? You the noise would make you uncomfortable, or you don't want to get along with them, or what was your experience when you would come back at home? How it make you feel?
I struggled back at home because I'm sensitive to certain noises, so like plates and cutlery, or people shouting, that kind of thing would just give me a migraine that could last for 3 days. The longest migraine I ever had lasted for a week and a half, and it was awful. You just lose your will to live when you're going through a headache that long. And I would explain myself to people. I would say, I can't cope with this noise and this noise. Is it possible that you could make less of that noise? And there was certain people that I'm not gonna, bring up by name, but there's certain people in my family who went out of their way to then cause more of the noise because they didn't respect the way that I got overstimulated by stuff. They didn't seem to. At first, it started out they didn't understand it, and then they decided that I was just being picky and difficult. So I really I enjoyed being at uni more because I could control my environment, and that is an interesting point because I actually struggle in supermarkets with all the noise. You know, they play music on the speakers. There's people shouting. There's big metal trolleys coming past you. There's all the beeping. I struggle with that and I get confused. But when I'm on stage doing comedy, I'm perfectly fine because I'm in control of that situation. So whereas the average person might be quite nervous to get on stage, I actually find it relaxing because I'm totally in control. There's even been situations where I've told a joke about having synesthesia and having misophonia as well, which is where if you hear a noise that triggers you, you will sometimes just want to kill somebody because the noise annoys you that much. And I made a joke about that a few days ago, and somebody came up to me afterwards and said they were offended by it. And I was fine having that conversation, but the average person I know would panic. They'd go, "Oh no, I've upset somebody." But I know, my experience is real. Them being offended by it is real. So it's fine. We can get along. We can shake hands at the end of the day. I think it's in a way it's a gift.
Exactly. The thing is that you said
Sorry.
that the loud noise make you, and I know people that, and I have this idea too that it's more like that. It is a physical pain, a pain which is your brain is aching over there, your body is aching, your
Yes.
sensory system is aching, and that is difficult to explain to other people. So if you make a joke, and we were having this discussion a day before yesterday, somebody was having all the discussion that you did this, you did that, you are saying this, you are saying that, and I just said to them that whenever you say something, whenever you express some feeling, there would be somebody who might feel offended. But what you can do about that? That you want to express yourself, and there is a level which we call you say something, or you are talking to people who don't belong to the the community you belong. What we can do is to say things or do things that is a joke maybe, but in a respectable way. Like you do not cross that line. But if still people are offended, then you cannot do something about that. They have a choice to leave you. They have a choice to go to somewhere else, and they have a choice, like you're saying that about that person. He have a choice not to come to your show again.
Yeah.
Coming to you
And
and
it's a very
you feel offended. It's like that somebody is crossing your experience because that was your
yeah,
experience.
and they've made the decision to be there in that space. And it's very interesting, I've only recently realized in my life, I'm 30 now, and it's only it's a recent development that I thought my brain might work differently to the average person's brain. And realizing that a lot of the people that buy and enjoy my books that I've spoken to are autistic. So I might have even written a book in a way that suits their brains more than it suits everybody else's brain. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm probably not going to sell millions of copies, but I'm happy with that. I've written the book I wanted to write, and other people want to read. But it is very interesting when you try to explain these, like misophonia, especially because of how extreme it can get sometimes. Like if a dog's barking, I will just get really angry. If it's like a high pitched bark, I have to go away because it annoys me, and it annoys me on two levels. Because one, it's a noise that's triggering, and two, it usually happens because your neighbour's leaving the dog out in the rain, and you think, well, somebody needs to go and tell them that that's not okay. And I have done that before. I'll admit I've done that before. I've walked across the street and said, look, your dog wants to come inside. It's been asking you to let it inside for an hour. It's going to get cold out here. And it's a weird thing because people get very confrontational. And I think another thing about autism, like it's a bit of a segue, but another thing about autism I've noticed is autistic people tend to get along with animals really well.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I thought about like my own potential diagnosis is that whenever I have a friend who says, "Oh, when you come to my house, I have a nervous dog, I have a nervous cat. Don't be offended if they don't want to be anywhere near you. Don't approach them. They're quite nervous." I will sit in their house, and their animals will just come and sit with me. Like animals love me. I've never really understood why, but it is interesting because there's a few autistic people. I can't remember them by name, but I've heard of autistic people working in farms and being okay as vets, but struggling to work in other
Even some of
situations.
them say they're cat person, so autism is cat. Something there's different speculation going around, but people like pets, some people don't like pet, and the thing is that there's some therapies also that is like children are spending some time with some animal, and they help let them understand the emotions or express the emotion. So it's more like
Mm.
that. And other thing is there are a lot of service dog also that help the autistic child, because it is kind of a protection from the something, because sometimes children don't want children don't know how to get along with other people, or how to get along with their neighbors or friends. So if they have dog, they feel comfortable, maybe they feel protected too, because the animal is protecting them and they're protecting them. So it's more like a bond between them. And I know few people who say that we understand what they say to us. Like somebody
Yes.
told
Yeah.
me this about the birds, and they're very very interesting. I will share your experience with you. uh, there was a place I went to a place, and there were animals, and once out of blue they started uh, their whatever their sound is, either it's cow or it's duck, whatever it was, all the animals in that place started making noises, and I
Yeah.
didn't understand what is happening around them. And after 5 minutes, they're the one you could call the farmer, or the one who was taking care of them, then came around. And then that person
Yeah.
told me that whenever I, and from that I get this idea, even that person is far away, they feel him, you know and they start making noise.
Mm. Yeah.
Their senses are sharp toward that. So it's like, after that, the time I spend over there, I knew that that person is coming home, because they're
Yeah.
making noise, and that person was very far away. You could say maybe 1 km or 2 km, but even then they would feel, okay, he's coming. So that's how they respond you back, and they're maybe not judgmental toward you, and they listen to you, you listen to them. So maybe that's why a lot of people want to have pets around them. And there's a lot of things also, but whatever you said about autistic community or ADHD community or AUDHD, there's a lot of things, a lot of you could say variation in few things. They like, but some don't like. It's not always because
Yeah.
somebody would like cat, somebody would like dog, somebody would like fish. you know so it's more like that. So the thing that you were explaining, and I just have this discussion with people around me yesterday, and they were saying that we are very okay with or we think that only neurodivergent people are going to understand us, and we can have a relationship with them. I said that this is your experience, and you cannot have that experience generalized. Sometimes you can get offended from those people too. They can get toxic too. For
Yeah.
example, you're talking about your own family, and there are a lot of autistic people in your community, or sorry, in your family, and you are still not heard over there. They did not understand you. They
No.
did not understand your
Mm.
need. So that is an example that uh, the criteria that we set for relationship, the criteria that we set for friendship, even for working environment too, it's not going to work always, because it could be speculation, and they could be using something, or maybe they could come, or maybe I know somebody told me in one of my discussion that she was bullied by autistic adult. I mean, she was autistic, and the person who was bullying her was autistic too. So other people
Mm.
was very, considerate of her,
Yeah.
but that person was not considerate. So you never know what human being is, because beside your diagnosis, you're a human being too. So you're capable of doing everything. It's not that if you're not capable of doing good, or you're only capable of doing good things. So
Yeah.
I would like to say some because you say that you write short stories. So do you publish those short stories or not?
I do. Yeah. I publish some of them.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually I'll publish all of them, but some of them, as soon as they're done, I think they're ready to go out into the world. I tend to write stuff based on real science at the moment, so a bit of dark comedy mixed in with science, because I'm quite interested into science communication.
Science
So, like,
comedy, what we will call it.
yeah, we'll teaching the average person, like member of the public, a bit about physics or biology.
Mm-hmm.
I find the idea of doing that in short stories to be quite interesting because I'm really into science and I also really like writing short stories. So it just makes sense that I put the two together. And what I've got is I've got like poetry collections which have references to astrophysics and quantum physics. And I've got short stories. Um, I could read you one. I don't know how old your audience is because there's some jokes in the one I've thought about which are a bit, they might be over 18, some of the jokes.
You look like you think that I'm 18.
No, I just don't know who your listeners are right now.
Yes, that
So
is the point actually. So I think we have to consider the fact, but we will ask you to read something for us. But I would also like to ask something from you, that you're writing a story about
yeah,
time
sure.
travel, and that is an interesting part, because we were having this discussion about time travel before we started this recording, and how you get this idea to, because in your, it is also come film the time travel. So why this idea came to you?
I've always been interested in time travel since I was a little kid, and I find that a lot of my stories wind up having some element of time travel to it. I think because of the way I hyper focus as well,
Mhm.
if I have an idea for a story, I'll want to try out all of the ideas. So naturally, what's happened is I've written a story where somebody goes backwards in time, and then I've written another story where somebody goes backwards in time, but the rules are different. So they can go back in time and they can actually change the past. And then I thought, I still don't feel like I've completed telling the story about time travel. So I've written another story where they go back in time, and this time they cannot change the past, but there's somebody already there who's trying. And then you have all of these variations on the theme, basically. And that's how I wind up writing short story collections, is they'll have a theme to them. So the first one that I wrote was the theme was comedy and simulation theory. So the idea that we live inside a video game. That's the one that I was playing around with. And now my big thing is time travel. So I'm writing a trilogy of time travel novels. I'm writing a short story collection about time travel. And I'm also writing a comedy show about time travel in fiction and what it means for people. Because I believe time travel, it's people see it as a science fiction concept, but I think it's more sort of human, philosophical. I mean, stories about time travel were written by Buddhist monks thousands of years before the term time science fiction was even invented. People have been writing about time travel in all of the world's religions. There's various pieces of evidence of
Actually, you're
people
right.
being taken by gods
Yeah.
and placed into environments where time flows differently. So they return home and everybody's much older.
Yeah, and there
So
were
stuff
ancestral
like that is
people that
very
you tried
interesting
over
to me.
there.
That
And remember, we were talking about that paraglider things also. Like the aeroplane, and those things are found in a place which is maybe hundreds of years old,
yeah.
and these are both different pole.
Mm.
So they found that thing, and they found that thing. One thing they found in pyramid, and the other thing, if the other aeroplane they found in Colombia. So there are two different places, but even then they find it. And like, you're very much right over here, and I would say that uh, time travel, has been discussed maybe for centuries, and for people it's just right, because we see this in movies now, like they're traveling, and they have to change the past and the future, so things are different, if you say that.
Mm. It's very interesting how it works and like how every single culture in history has independently written stories about time travel without contacting each other. Before they contacted each other, they'd all written stories about time travel, and it sort of implies to me that either time is something that's very fascinating to humans because we've only recently started measuring it, with clocks and sundials to help us, get the best harvest. So basically, so we don't starve to death. So time has been very important to people. And I think that's now part of our brains. And especially considering autistic people and neurodiverse people, we have a different relationship to time than everybody else. If I have an event on a day, I struggle to do two things in a day. So I'm doing this podcast recording now, and my brain is entirely focused on this, which makes me a good guest, I hope. But it does mean that I can't do anything else afterwards because I'll then be thinking about all the questions we've asked and new answers as soon as we stop recording. So yeah, time travel for me is interesting, especially from the comedy angle, because I'm asking people, I'm asking the audience, what would you do if you had a time machine? You could go back once. What would you go back to? And a lot of people like to say they'd go back and they'd stop, a big disaster. They'd go back and they'd make changes in history. But I think a lot of people really, if they're honest about it, they'd like to go back to a personal memory, like maybe one of their favorite memories and make it last a bit longer. So I think for that reason, time travel's a really personal thing rather than a science fiction thing. It's something everybody thinks about. Everybody has regrets. Everybody wants to go back to a good memory or a bad memory to change it. So it is something that's always going to be in the mind.
We're back here again. Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were talking about time traveling, and there's a very famous writing about that present, past, and future that exist at the same time. What do you think?
I think it's very interesting to look at the way we process things. Like conscious decision making is very interesting to think about as well. Because I mean, I might be wrong here, but I read a study a while ago which implied that we've already made a decision before we consciously think we've made a decision. So if you're choosing to go down a left path or a right path, your brain actually makes the decision before you consciously think, I've made this decision.
And maybe in
which is really,
maybe unconscious,
yeah, it's really interesting. So I think like definitely the idea of time travel. I mean, I'm basically trying to have an excuse to just be writing time travel stories here.
No,
But
that's okay. It's your interest. Why not? You don't need to have a reason.
Yeah,
Remember, I told
it's my special interest at the moment.
Uh,
Yeah.
You would say something and people would get offended for that, and
Yeah, I'm not one to care too much about that.
people have a people can choose not to come to your show. People can choose not to listen to you. They have the choice for just pass by you. But asking you and making you accountable for the choices that you make, it's your life, it's your choices, and that's how we say that you are an independent person and you're doing your own things. And uh, now let's talk about the thing that you choose to go for a diagnosis. Like they decided that it's your interest, and this is interesting by the way because I'm the one who also love to watch Doctor Who, one of my favorite. All the movies I watch, so we all watch those things. We all love those things. We all love movies. Maybe somebody is there who love Marvel, who love DC. So there's a lot of things people like to do, and they are free to choose whatever they want to. It's their interest. It's their life. At the end of the day, that person is the one who is going to live with that choice. So you cannot ask people to not to make that choice. It's their will to choose or not to choose. But tell me about the reason we would say that, or the main you could say the focus that you thought for going for a diagnosis. What was that?
Well, my little brother is autistic, and he's non-verbal. So he's 28 years old. I'm 30, and he's non-verbal. When we were younger, I grew up and I thought everybody that's autistic is non-verbal. That's what I believed because that's the only experience I had. And then as I grew older, I wound up meeting people who actually were quite similar to me, very interested in science. And, they'd really focus on stuff. So I've had people tell me that my books are some of the best books they've written. And I love that compliment. And I think it only happens because I've spent like the last 10 years of my life on it. And I found out that, as well as that being something that autistic people are capable of, my sister got diagnosed last year, and I took a look at, her diagnosis and the different forms you have to fill out. And I realized that I would have actually scored higher than she would have on her forms. So she made a joke. Oh, you're more autistic than me. You've just not been diagnosed yet. And on paper, I definitely would be. And I found that really interesting because I started to look back over times in my life when maybe I'd not been emotionally affected by some things that other people have been affected by.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, I feel like I know certain stuff's going to happen just before it does. I'm very intuitive, especially with animals and with when people are sick as well. It doesn't really upset me. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just think, well, this person's sick.
So
Being
you're
upset isn't
masking
going to do
basically.
anything about
You are masking. You just realize that you're masking your whole life.
it. Yeah, basically, yeah. Realized I was trying to pretend to be human, which I think is why the science fiction became a big thing in my
Mm-hmm.
life because there's characters in science fiction who are aliens,
Mm-hmm.
like Doctor who don't have the same emotional responses to things that the humans do. And
But
I
you know,
sort
if
of
you have emotion, you don't have emotion. You think that those people who have no emotion, they're not human.
yeah, I mean I do have emotions. It's just
Uh-huh.
they're about different things. So I'll be very upset if an animal's ill. But if a person's ill, I think, well, there's not much I can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to go for the practical solution rather than being upset about stuff. I'll get very frustrated if I'm held back creatively,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I'm self-employed because I just could not work for other people. I don't like being told what to do. And that impacts my publishing business as well because I will want to publish the books that I've written, and I'll work with editors. I've got a brilliant editor at the moment who I'm really good friends with, but
Mm-hmm.
it's taken me 10 years to find somebody that I got along with that well. Because if I'm set on an idea, sometimes people don't understand why I'm pursuing the idea until it's reached its completion. So I've noticed especially like growing up, you watch TV, and I related a lot. You know, the mad scientist kind of
Mm-hmm.
characters, like
Mm-hmm.
Doctor Who, or some of the
Back to the
characters from
Future,
Scooby Doo
that,
as well.
and you know that Star Trek, the whole series, it's all about that. And there's other movies too, which is about those
Yeah,
phenomena. And the characters is also something I would say that are similar to people we see around us. You know, somebody cannot express their emotions.
yeah,
Somebody are, a meta-human kind of a thing, and somebody, So there's a lot of things
mm,
going around. People are maybe telling the world about different things, maybe in disguise. There's a term called in our, you could say, in our psychology that is called, we use different kind of defense mechanism. So that was basically channelizing the idea. That is what comedy is also all about. Or you're projecting some idea in a way that is socially acceptable. So maybe
yes,
somebody came to TV and say that, okay, we are a person that we don't have emotions. You know, it's not about that you don't have emotions. Everybody have emotions. According to researches, or there are a lot of researches on that, and maybe you find some research too, that a person or a child that is born and the child don't have, you could say, um, he cannot listen or she cannot watch, they still have emotions. So
mm,
it's more like that a person is born with three basic emotions. Like we say that, okay, the moment a child is born, the child would have fear, and other thing is, I guess, happiness, and a little bit aggression too, if I'm not
mm.
wrong about that. And this is proved by a
No,
lot
that
of
sounds right.
researches. So a child who was born without any listening or hearing, he have those emotions. Then there's other thing, that when a child is crying, then the crying is of different type. When the child is hungry, he's crying differently, or she's crying differently. Or when the child is happy, cryness is
Mm,
different, they cry differently. When the child is want to have somebody around, they cry different. So they cry in happiness, so they are variation. But the thing is that a person need to find that, person need to understand that, and a person need to have understanding of that. So whenever my client asks me, I said that it's not that you don't have emotions, it's not that you cannot talk, it's like you don't know how to express those emotions. And it's more like a lot of emotions come to you and you feel overwhelmed for that emotions. Like maybe right now you're feeling overwhelming, but you don't know what you're feeling right now. Is it like that or not?
no, it can be like that sometimes. Sometimes I just don't find myself affected by the same things as everybody else.
But
So
later
I'll
on.
get along very well with animals. Sometimes like if people say they found a joke or a story offensive, I genuinely do not understand why. Like, I will try to understand it, and I just think, well, it's just somebody else expressing an idea that might make you uncomfortable. But I value people that make me think. So a lot of my friends and followers that I have on Twitter, for example, I follow a lot of people that I disagree with on some very important points, like politics, who they vote for. I follow people that vote for people that I don't vote for.
Mhm.
And I noticed a lot of neurotypical people like without autism, they won't do that. So if they vote on the left, they will only have friends on the left. And if they vote on the right, they will only have friends on the right, whereas I have friends all over the place.
Yeah,
And
and
I've
something
noticed a
about
lot a
like
lot
that,
of
and somebody
artists.
contacted me and they said that why you interview this person, and I said that I don't know, I have
Yeah.
nothing to do with somebody orientation in terms of politics, but there was a lot of longer discussion going around and going around. There was a lot of things going around, and I said that I don't want to have in this discussion because either you're left, either you're right. It's your own choice, and nobody is going to get influence into
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
And they have followers, and the other side have followers too. So getting upset and making that person responsible for the choice a leader made. I mean, everybody is responsible for their own actions, you know? Like, I will not ask
Hmm.
you, or I cannot hold you responsible for your neighbor whose dog is outside, you know? By asking that was your neighbor, you should have asked
Exactly.
him to take the dog inside. So it's more like that. So now I would say that I would like you to read little bit piece of your story, maybe that might people don't might find offensive if who are above 18 or below 18.
Oh,
If
don't
you
worry.
have something like that.
I found a better one. I found a better one. Don't worry.
Okay, okay.
So this one isn't a comedy one. It's the start of a novel called The Stephanie Glitch,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about a teenage girl who grows up and she has synesthesia like I do, so she can see things differently. But on top of that, she realizes that she can also see outside of her universe, and she realizes that she's in a simulated world
Mm-hmm.
that's about to be deleted. So she needs to find a way out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this novel's going to be available for free on my website because I just want more people to read it. To be honest, I'm happy selling some books and having others for free. So yeah, this is chapter 1, and you can tell me when to stop because it's quite long. It was a cold Tuesday morning, and the universe had just begun to end. Tumai's motors wheezed as he slid desperately through private airlocks and corridors. He cursed himself for not leaving a character behind on the research deck. Precious seconds of time were being wasted. The humans were in another asteroid somewhere else, too far away to beat him there, even if they were awake. Tumai's eye wobbled as he turned tight corners. He scanned the area ahead. His senses repeated the same impossible story. A human heartbeat was in the research deck, but the only body there was unfinished. It didn't have a heart yet. The machine checked the most recent progress logs for the research deck, hoping that something was wrong, that the data would change. It didn't. Skeletal structure was optimal. The printer bugs were performing optimally, but there was a pod failure. Tumai's social programming recommended terror, so that is what Tumai felt. He listed the reasons to have fear. Number 1, the Artifice starship was a long way away from home. 2, nobody else should be out here. 3, it could be a stowaway attacker. 4, there could be an alien on board. 5, humans were not yet prepared for first contact with an alien species. 6, the alien species might be hostile. The crew were all accounted for, sleeping peacefully in their quarters. The only answer to the heartbeat mystery was that the unfinished body in the research deck, mindless and malformed, had somehow birthed itself prematurely from the cylinder and started walking around. But that was impossible. It could have died already, unless she did something impossible. Tumai queried the pod itself. All systems were nominal. The printer bugs were still in their idle communication around the skeleton, their tiny minds ignorant to the growing panic in the starship. But something was still wrong. Perhaps the bugs were faulty. Perhaps they had banded together and commandeered the skeleton. It was a ridiculous idea, one his social programming seemed happy to suggest, an amalgam of human nightmares and stories scraped from the dream screen. The blue light in Tumai's bulbous eye darted around desperately, a mimicry of human terror. The machine was afraid. and now it changes to another chapter, which is Stephanie explains simulation theory.
Yes,
The older life is a get
people
to.
need to,
Uh,
okay. I would like to say people need to read that novel from your book, maybe, or from your
yeah,
website, you know.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it works better on page than it
Yeah,
does
that
being
is a
read out
point, you know,
because
and you get more interested because when you're reading something, and which is why they need to go to your website. So I would like you to give your the details that you have, so people, how can people find you, how can people find your stories, the short story, maybe somebody might be interested in time traveling stories, maybe somebody might be interested in physics and comedy at the same time, and expressing emotions in different form. So how can they find you?
so I am real Philip Carter on
Mhm.
Substack.com, and maybe you can add a link to the
Yes,
podcast
I
as
will.
well. And
Yeah,
it's
we will do that.
basically just real Philip Carter on everything. So it's just the word real and then Philip with two L's and then Carter. And you just Google that. And I'm on Twitter, I'm on TikTok. I do gaming streams. So if people like Minecraft, I play Minecraft on Twitch under that name as well. I
Mhm.
write short stories on Substack. I do comedy on TikTok. It's not very good comedy. It takes me about 10 minutes for my phone to load TikTok. So by the time it's turned on, I'm bored and I forgot the idea I had. And I'm on Instagram as well, where I do writing advice and talk about, synesthesia and potentially being diagnosed with autism, and also the short stories I'm writing. So yeah, it's mainly just science fiction and comedy that I do. So yeah, it's just real Philip Carter, and that works everywhere.
So we will also give the link under that whenever the episode is coming. So that was interesting talking to you because people think that like you also thought that the person who is autistic cannot speak, cannot talk. Like you have those people in your family too. But
Yeah,
and you know that happened with a lot of people that they thought they're not autistic because but uh, still they felt like you felt in your life that there's something different about you, you know. You're not like other people, but it doesn't mean that you're not human. You're human and your existence matters. The way you share your experience is different, the way you thought might be different from other people, but everybody is different. Everybody is experiencing happiness differently. Your way will be different, my way will be different, and X, Y, Z way will be different too. So it's not like that you don't feel emotions. You're not a robot. You're a human being. You don't have chip or something else is going around. You know, maybe at the end of the
yeah,
day, a lot of people are saying this that if you look toward the simulation or the information that is going in the brain, or you could say computer, it's same like human brain, and the decoding is same like we have decoding in our DNA. But at the end of the day, those are human beings who made those computer. That's why people say that how artificial intelligence is going to take the humanity, because at the end of it, the human beings are there who create that that artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of movies on that too, that artificial intelligence becomes so intelligent that they take the humanity. So these are the controversy. Maybe we will know when we grow up about that thing. So thank you so much for coming to us today. And is there something else, or I would say that at the end you want to say something to the audience, or you have any?
and no, I just wanted to say, like, if you think that you might have autism or something, you should definitely look into it, because I spent maybe 10, 15 years wondering before I even tried to look into it.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying those are wasted years, but like it would have explained a lot of stuff. I would have understood a lot of things better. Now, like, accepting that I've got some sensory processing issues has made my life easier.
Yeah.
It's difficult at first because you realize, oh, I can't do certain things,
Hmm.
but then you realize you can actually tell people why you can't do them, and then we understand each other a bit better.
And
And
the
also,
thing
I
is
wanted
that
to thank you
you
as the
cannot do
host
all
as
that,
well,
you know.
because this has been the first interview where I'm talking about it. So thank you for being such a good host, and I look forward to watching the
Thank you for
interview.
telling to the world that this is who you are, because we need to understand that either you're diabetic, either you have some hypertension, you have any kind of abnormality which is physical, that make you as human as other people are. And even if you have depression, if you have anxiety, it doesn't mean that you're not human. You're as human as the people around. So same is true for
Yeah.
autistic community too. Same is true for those who have ADHD. Same is true for other neurodivergent community too. So it's like everybody is different. We know that. That is the first principle of psychology, which we study was individual differences. So we need to understand that before those things coming around, and when the researchers started, like you are doing this time travel thing, we started from individual differences. So we know that people are individual and people are different, and everything is different, and your every experience is different. So that's what make the humanity beautiful. That is difference, and that is creativity too. So thank you so much for coming to us today and sharing your experience and sharing the story. And we will definitely add the link to, if somebody want to reach out, or somebody want to read your creative science fiction, physics, comedy, because
Yeah.
we want humor in our life. So that's all
Yeah,
for
no, I
today.
want it to be accessible as well. So I've read a story that's completely free. So if people want to
Of
read
course,
it, they don't have to.
we will have
Totally
this.
free. Yeah.
The link will be, and your other detail will be also when we release that episode. Thank you so much for coming to us today.
Thank you.
Bye.